This is a documentary released in 2003. Although 20 years have passed, it remains deeply moving. The entire film tells a story about human evolution, recreating for us the arduous journey of humans emerging from countless organisms on Earth, standing out through a perilous process, as well as how they became the most intelligent life form in history. The journey of humans tracing their ancient ancestors can be traced back 3.5 million years. At that time, our earliest ancestors appeared on the African savannas. They are also known as southern apes. In the evolutionary journey spanning over 200,000 generations that followed, human ancestors, through harsh natural selection and competition, managed to survive until 30,000 years ago, a landmark event occurred. That is, from that time onwards, only one species of bipedal ape remained on Earth, which we call wise man Homo sapiens. They are the direct ancestors of modern humans. Now, let us together, following this old documentary, trace back that magnificent journey of life. Time goes back over 3 million years ago on the great African savanna. These primitive ape men had already begun to form groups of a certain scale, and the first thing these ancient African relatives did upon waking was to drink a mouthful of spring water. At this time, they had already made a decision that went against their ancestors. That is, to stand and walk on two legs. It was precisely this behavior that laid the foundation for their future dominance. This handsome-looking fellow before us is the leader of this group. His name is Zhang Wei. The 25-year-old Zhang Wei is in his prime, but the lifespan of these ape men was generally only just over 50 years. And at that time, quite a few giant beasts still existed. For example, this creature before us is called Chalicotherium. It is also a close relative of the rhinoceros. Zhang Wei, as the tribe leader, must constantly be wary of these ancient megafauna. After all, he is the core of the entire family group. Only when he is present can all members be united. However, in this era, no matter how careful, one could still encounter ambushes. These crocodiles have been deadly hunters since ancient times. Without any surprise, our Zhang Wei, the leader, perished less than a minute after appearing. After all, when facing a crocodile's ambush, the ape men were helpless. The ape man tribe, having lost its leader, became like scattered sand. Now, they not only had to face predators appearing at any time, but also faced a more serious matter, which was that another ape man tribe lived nearby. If the other side found out their group had no leader, then the entire family group would inevitably be slaughtered. Therefore, the primary task they needed to do now was to choose a new leader. For example, this young fellow with a somewhat sly look, he has a volatile temperament but immense ambition. The leader's sudden death this time also provided him with an opportunity, so he also wanted to compete for the position of tribe leader. This scene was recorded by a photographer who had just found a job on a job website, recorded, and to become the leader. Besides good health and a strong physique, one also needed a quick mind and good relationships with others. Of course, besides these things, one also needed to win over the most authoritative female in the tribe. That is, the leader's primary mate. The ape woman with delicate features and dignified appearance before us is named Xiao Mei. She is Zhang Wei's mate. Originally, before Zhang Wei met his fate, her status was very high. However, now she has become the target that all candidates want to conquer. That day, Xiao Mei was originally mourning Zhang Wei, but the young fellow suddenly approached Xiao Mei's side. This was an excellent opportunity. If he could just win Xiao Mei's favor, then the leader's position would be within his grasp. However, the impetuous young fellow was clearly too hasty, starting to get physical without even trying to communicate. This behavior thoroughly angered Xiao Mei. Subsequently, Xiao Mei's loud cries also attracted other members of the group. When everyone saw the young fellow trying to make a sneaky move, this behavior clearly could not be tolerated by the other males. A chaotic brawl thus broke out. All the male members wanted to distinguish themselves in this big fight. After all, the leader's position had been vacant for too long. However, every group has its share of petty schemers. One young fellow, physically weaker than the others, suddenly had a wild idea. Taking advantage of the chaos, he snatched Xiao Mei's child. The reason for doing so was thinking he could force Xiao Mei to submit. However, he didn't know that his actions also brought mortal danger upon himself. After snatching the child, he had to flee first, and then find a chance to use the child to intimidate everyone. And the tribe members engaged in the brawl also discovered the despicable act of this treacherous individual. So, everyone chased after him. The young are the bottom line for a family group. They had to eliminate this unprincipled traitor. However, the treacherous one, carrying the child, had already run a couple of miles. Just when he thought he was safe, disaster struck again. Because he had carelessly run into the territory of the neighboring group, the entire neighboring family group instantly from all directions charged out. This scene directly stunned the treacherous fellow with fear. And Xiao Mei's group, arriving in pursuit, had no choice but to engage in battle with the other group. Amidst the chaos, the child also fell to the ground. The fighting grew fiercer. Some even began grabbing wooden sticks. Seeing her child in danger, Zhao Mei risked entering the chaotic crowd. However, just as she picked up the child from the ground, she herself met with disaster. Zhao Mei was also severely injured. The injury to the back of her head was not something an ordinary APA person could withstand. However, the story of these AP people does not end here. The instinct of mammals allowed them to learn to pass things on, and standing upright enabled them to see higher and farther. As generations of ape people continued to develop like this, they would also gradually shed these primitive animal behaviors, especially after liberating their hands. When these creatures discovered that hands could not only be used for climbing trees, but also for making and using tools, then a new chapter of the story was about to begin.